and why should we listen to him? So for 10 years I was a professional wrestler, and that was 20 years ago, so it was quite a long time ago. And it was a lot of fun. I traveled all over the world and had a great time. But also, it was pretty dark in some places too. You know, it was very competitive in the locker rooms. Especially, I traveled in Japan. There were a lot more manners in Japan. And then going to the States, it got ruder and ruder, and it was really kick the other guy off the ladder, especially if you were in the same height category, etc., or had some of the same skills. So breaking down someone's spirit. By the end of it, I was taking a lot of painkillers too, which weren't healthy for me, obviously. And it took me into a really dark place. So I found that by the end of that, I knew my body was breaking down. I actually broke my C5, C6 vertebrae, just hairline fractures. Got a hip replacement just back in March from dropping all those big elbows.
Sorry to hear about all that.
So it's okay. It's all gone. It's all good now.
Good.
But at the very end, it was really dark for me, and I felt like a pressure cooker inside the whole time. And I just had this anger, frustration, irritation, and I may have made more money than I should have for a guy in his 20s. So I was kind of spoiled, used to getting things right now, or I had the money for it. And when it all came to an end and it broke my neck, then all that was gone. So what I loved, the business that I loved was gone, and the money was gone, and it was a really hard time. I got semi-depressed for about a year afterwards. And I learned some different things. I knew I had to change my mind. I had to shift it from being this dark, grumpy place. And it doesn't help when you're in pain from your neck down to your ankles every day, but also just my attitude. And in between Japan tours, a lot of times I'd bounce. So I'd bounce in a bar, and you're dealing with some of the worst, right? You're dealing with locker room crap and a bunch of real jerks sometimes. Some of them were great guys too, or fights every night in a bar. So my mentality was a block people out mentality. And so I had this blocking thing going on. I had this pressure cooker thing going on, and I wasn't in a good place. So unlike a lot of wrestlers, at least I have, I wouldn't say I'm any kind of a genius whatsoever, but I at least have a higher IQ than most of the guys. So I knew I had to seek something out mentally and study and practice so that I could get out of that spot that I was in. Because I looked at other people just walking down the street, they had normal lives. Even a Japanese couple, a young couple I saw that just before the end of my career, and they're holding hands and they're smiling and they're laughing. And I just thought, geez, I never do that. I'm just trotting around and angry and tough all the time. And it wasn't a good feeling at all. So I started to read on Taoism. So I've studied a lot of Taoism over the last 15 years. Hinduism, which I really love too. It's very deep, a lot of it though. Hard to wrap your head around. Also some yoga philosophies, such as the 8 limbs of yoga. I'm talking the philosophies, not the exercises, even though I've done the asanas too. But I've also managed World Health Clubs and seen them just be an exercise class. And to me, it's 10% of the iceberg of what yoga really is. It's the mental part and the philosophical part of what yoga truly is. And I studied with a Buddhist monk for about 4 years. So that was pretty cool. About 2.5 hours at a time, 3 times a week for 4 years. So I've learned tons and tons of different meditations for all the different mental states. Haven't memorized them all. I'm not saying I'm perfect or anything like that, but I've memorized a lot of them. And there's a book called The New Meditation Handbook by my teacher's teacher, which has a lot that can remind me sometimes too. So that's sort of my background, and that's why I'm here today. So there's a saying, you guys have probably heard it before, everyone stops for the car crash, right? And we were just on our way back from Canmore the other day, and we were on 16th, and I think somebody hit a deer or something. And sure enough, it came to a dead standstill. And I was just rewriting my talk for a big group, and then this just happened. So it's so funny that it happened. And we're just at a complete standstill. And, you know, if you think about it, as a society, we're kind of sick in that way, right? It's a little bit demented that we stare or are attracted to drama, you know? And the bad news sells newspapers. The Calgary Sun for a while tried to sell all good news for a while. They had all these requests for people. They're sick and tired of all the bad news, making their day a downer. And so they tried to do all good news. Guess what happened to newspaper sales? Right? Just dumped. So part of this conditioning that we have, though, that we are attracted to trauma, and we don't even know it usually. Sometimes we'll even think about it the next day. Why was I so focused on that? Because it was a horrible, rotten thing, and it wasn't even my life. Because we hear things about Donald Trump all the time, right? And we get wound up about it as Canadians. We don't have a vote. We don't have a choice in the matter. So why should we get wound up about it? I'm guilty of that too sometimes, but. And I'm not saying he's the worst thing that could have happened to the U.S., but he does some pretty ridiculous things. So, and it's kind of built into us from prehistoric man or woman days, right? That's the genes that we have, that we're taught fight or flight, or to hide, on these things. So these problems. So now we carry it. In this day and age, we don't really need the fight or flight much anymore, except if you step out in front of a car, jump back, right? But that's about the worst danger that we physically have, not like fighting off saber-toothed tigers or something like that. So, but we're still carrying this around with us. So when we have something that's a negative emotion, if we're having anger, if we're having fear, or self-sabotage, which I'm mostly going to talk about today, anxiety, then we freak out inside. And we don't know where it comes from, because it just sparks up. And the Tibetans, they call that Shempa, the emotional charge, where you feel it in your gut, or it's like a band around your sternum, and it pulls in tight, and it just, we don't know, why am I so freaked out about this? Have you ever felt that before? Yeah. So that's how our mind works from our genetics from way in the past. And with self-sabotage, if we can feel it just as it begins to bubble up, then we've got self-realization. We know what's going on. And it takes some practice and some work, but self-realization trumps self-sabotage every time, as long as you practice. Sort of like going to work out or do some kind of yoga or other exercises. You might notice after a while of doing that, you go to the grocery store and you grab a bunch of grocery bags and you're like, oh wow, these are suddenly very light. Because you've been working out, preparing your body for that beforehand. Same with the training of the mind, preparing the mind for the situations beforehand. Because it's too late if you just jump into the situation. Say something really negative or bad happens, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to try and control my mind now. You haven't built up to it. So that's kind of how that works. And sorry if I'm talking really fast. Take notes. I've been trying to cram 60 minutes into 20 here for the group. and like anger a lot of times, Napoleon Hill said there is no limitation to the mind except for that which we acknowledge. And so if we can catch something like anger in the very early stages, just as it begins to bubble up, that's a real practice, and you got to pay a lot of attention to it, but we can catch it and say, oh, isn't that interesting? I'm getting angry. So you're not denying it, you're not suppressing it, you're just kind of flowing through it, and then you think about it a little bit. And meditating on it works even better, because we go, as we're speaking right now, this is beta brainwave level. Not to say there's no value to that, because there is, and the philosophies that go along with these things are important, but really in meditation, which I coach people through, and take them through very specific meditations for whatever their problem is in their life or their issue that they're trying to work through, it's not all the same thing. I mean, I've been to temples where they tell you to stare at a wall for an hour. Great, you can do that at home, right? So guided meditations, for something very specific, for something that's going on with you, are what really work. Because so beta brainwave, as we're speaking right now, and just conscious, sort of mathematical mind, down deeper to subconscious alpha brainwave. And that's where the shifts take place. It's much more powerful. They say that our subconscious mind controls 90% of what's happening with us, which isn't that incredible? It's kind of scary, actually. Yeah. But you can actually go down there and you can set your zone or your Shempa or your emotional charge beforehand with a little bit of practice. And so anger kind of works like this too. Usually we'll realize that we've blown up after the situation, right? Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that yesterday. Jeez, I could never do that again, right? That's sort of a natural thing too. And when we're young, we're taught to either repress or explode. We have tantrums when we're kids, or we have these models of parents or teachers or whoever it might be that all they do is repress or explode when they get angry. And we think those are the only options, two options, repress or explode. But there's actually a way you can flow through anger. So you're not denying it, you're not repressing it, and you don't have to blow up and look like an idiot. And a little bit more evolved than that is when we catch it in the middle. Say if you have kids or a loved one and you start to yell, I told you not to, but you catch yourself. Done a little damage control. Not so bad, but still there's that on the other end. They've got that Shempa or that charge at that point. And then we feel awful because we see the look on their face. And so you've done a little bit of damage, but it's not bad. It's still better than completely blowing up or losing it or repressing it, because we know if we keep repressing, it's going to come out some way, somehow, without us even really knowing, in a very inappropriate situation possibly. Yeah. And so the best way to do it is to find it and catch anger or any other negative emotion right as it begins to bubble up again. Just catch it. So if you're paying attention to and taking note of your feelings over a little while, and then you're meditating on them, I do what's called a let go meditation. I'm probably not going to have time today, but the L is to look deep inside while you're in meditative state, while you're totally calm, you've done a lot of breathing, you're in a very relaxed state. And then the E is to explore and kind of poke around in there. What is it that's really getting to me? Because a lot of times we don't know what it is. We're just irritable all day long, even for a week. And we're like, I don't know what's driving me crazy and why I'm being so snappy with everybody. So through this explore part, we can discover it in a little more of a subconscious way. And then it becomes conscious and we're like, okay, that's what it was. And then to transport that feeling is a T and let go. I can't get into it too deeply, but it's just to take the emotion and remove it, put it outside. And the G is to gray it out. So visualizing, feeling, a foggy feeling, almost like trying to remember the eye color or teeth of your first date, or the table or chair arrangement of the lunchroom in your first job. You know, how many years ago? It was a long time for me. I can't remember a lot of that stuff, right? So that's kind of how that works. And that's self-realization. And with that self-realization, you can start to work towards living your highest self. And we've heard that term. There are a lot of cliches that get thrown around all the time, but living in our highest self is really the best way to be. And a lot of situations we have to ask ourselves, is this really real? Like, is this thing that I'm obsessing about or really, really upset or hurting about, is it really real? Or as the Eastern philosophies say, are we placing exaggerated attention onto this situation in front of us? And that's a nice way of putting it. And it really triggers us. We don't have these kind of words in our Western society. We don't have words like Shempa. It's just pretty cool. So I've tried to put most of it into plain English. Otherwise you wouldn't understand what the heck I'm saying most of the time. But it's good to know where your machinery is, where your brakes are, where your accelerator is, because as we discussed earlier on, somebody was saying I'm not really authentic. Well, with you guys, I'm a little bit louder than usual and maybe a little bit more inspired because I love being in front of groups. But am I going to act that way with my best friend in a room somewhere? Probably tone it down a little bit, right? So I think I'm authentic, and there's a time and a place for everything. And you can go over the top. If there's 100 people, I'm even louder and jump around, you know. If it's my girlfriend, then I'm quiet and calm and cool, and we just have a nice time together. I think that's authentic. And I think we can choose our own energy levels. So, how many of you guys know what a glass ceiling is? Okay. So our glass ceiling is sort of our mental limitation cap. Something we're trying to break through. We can see the other side. We know what we want, and we're just like, geez, I can't seem to get there. You know, why do I keep trying over and over again, and it just doesn't work. I can't seem to burst past that. And so that's something I teach people as well in one-on-one coaching sessions, is how to get past those. And a lot of times we do know what it is. We have a pretty good understanding of what you want or what's stopping you even, but you might not think you have the knowledge or the talent to do that. And that's another glass ceiling in a sense, or a mental limitation cap. So yeah, I know what I've got to do. Don't know if I can though, but I can. You know, I know I can do this, but you still got blocks. So to remove those blocks is really important. And mantras are really good to do it with, telling yourself over and over again. I find them very helpful. But going into alpha brainwave state, practicing meditation that's very specific and has proper philosophies to your unique situation really starts to shift things in a subconscious way. And there's, a lot of people that say, I can't help it, I was born that way. It's automatic, right? And sometimes we may even catch ourselves doing that. This can be true to some extent, but not if you have the tools to see a little bit deeper than most people. People walking out there almost like blindfolded, like zombies hurrying in the streets all the time. They live their life not being present with their partner or not being fully present at work, just going through robotic motions. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to live like that. So existing in the present moment is such a beautiful way to live life. And I can't say that I'm there all the time, but I do pay attention to when I'm rushing, when things feel jumbled, and then I try and breathe and slow it down and just enjoy. just enjoy that presence, with whoever it is, one person, a group. Can you feel that a little bit right now?
Very clear, 5 minutes.
Yes. Yeah, I saw your... So, another part of it is in neuro-linguistic programming. You may have heard of it in NLP. A lot of Tony Robbins stuff is based on that. Is VACOG, so visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. So we see, and they say men are more visual. We feel, it's kinesthetic. I was very kinesthetic when I was wrestling because it was always grabbing and grappling and everything. But kinesthetic can mean a feeling too, that kind of feeling. So I think a lot of women are more kinesthetic than men in that sense. I like to think I'm pretty tuned in and pretty intuitive too, but I know a lot of guys who aren't. They're just not there. Olfactory is visual, auditory. Yeah, auditory, skip that. So just hearing, right? You may be better at hearing and remembering things than seeing and remembering things, or songs, things like that. I remember my friends could memorize words to songs when I was a teenager, and I could never memorize the words to songs. They just had this talent, And then olfactory is a smell, so it can be that old lady nasty perfume that I used to have to smell in church sometimes, or it can be a really nice smell like bread or nice bakery, something like that, and that reminds us of certain things in our past. And gustatory is taste, of course, and they all bring out these triggers, this shempa, this emotional charge. So with aversion, it's what I call one of the 3 A's: anger, attachment, and aversion. So there are 3 inner enemies, is what they call them in the Eastern philosophies. And so being mentally attached, grasping or clinging on to something emotionally or mentally that we just can't let go of. And oftentimes it's something that's bad, and it's just a memory from the past. So why am I clinging and grasping onto this old thing? That's what I help people work through too. Okay, so we're going to find out why. We're going to go a little bit deeper. What is it specifically? And then there's a realization, typically. And to make that shift or to make that change, oftentimes it's going to have to be either an epiphany, or it's something I just call the recognition point, where it is fairly cognitive, but wow, it's been so many times pounded into your brain, maybe thousands of times, and you finally go, okay, I've got to make a change. Pain. Or it can be a rock bottom, like if somebody's trying to stop drinking and they just can't, or if they just got broken up in a long-time relationship, something like that. So it's a very serious matter, and you just can't let go of it. And it could be 5 years, 2 years old, whatever it is, and we're still not able to let go. Well, there's a way to do that. You can absolutely do that. And with some of these practices, you can let go of something to a good extent that just happened yesterday and make it feel inside like it was 20 years ago, which I think is really cool. And then same thing with removing mental blocks. We go in deep, meditate, and then we start to see what these mental blocks really are. Because oftentimes they're not what we think they are. A lot of times we think we're right about something, but things aren't changing. So there must be something else. And then we can discover what it is over here.
So are most of the changes that you make emotionally around issues that you have through meditation?
It's a mix of, it's a 1 hour session typically, and there'll be maybe 1 meditation, maybe 2, and they're about only 7 minutes long. They're a guided meditation. So we would discuss, especially in the first session, just a discovery session, but with some tools to go home with still too. And then 1 meditation or 2 meditations according to where the person is. There's one called the Pond meditation. Do we have 5 more minutes still, just for a quick meditation?
I think we have 5 more minutes.
Yeah. Well, technically we have a minute and a half, but I don't think they're finishing yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll give you guys an example if you'd like to play along and do a quick meditation, okay? Okay, so both feet flat in the ground. Hands comfortably in your lap or folded. Spine perfectly straight. And imagine a string pulling up the top of your head so it's balanced on your spine. And take a few deep breaths all the way in, and all the way out. Naturally, not too forced, but fairly deep. And as you exhale, you can simply tell yourself to relax. Now you can follow your breath, counting 1 on the inhale, 2 on the exhale. 1, 2, and relax on the exhale. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now imagine you're on holiday and maybe someplace you've already been. You're on a white sand beach. It's early in the morning and you've gotten up before anybody else. And you decided to walk down this path and there are palm trees on both sides. No airplanes, no cars, no noise whatsoever. Still breathing deeply and nicely, relaxing. Maybe the odd sound of a bird. And near the end of this pathway you see a pond. And it was left over there from the ocean the night before, the warm ocean. And the sun's rising a bit and it's still warm water. You can look in there and see that there's nothing in there, not a plant, no animals. You dip your toes in just to test it out. And there's nobody around. So you decide to step on into this pond, breathing deeply and relaxing. And it only goes up to your neck. And you can imagine the buoyancy of the salt water holding your arms up and your legs up, sort of bouncing a little bit on tiptoe. And feeling the sun on the back of your neck, the warm morning sun, and fresh air. And as you turn and glide and bounce in the salt water, you can feel the sun on the right side of your face. And you turn a little more and you can feel the sun on your forehead, on the top of your head and your face. And you turn a little bit more, still just floating. You don't have a worry in the world. Completely relaxed. Now I'd like you to start in the direction of the opposite, because this is going to show you how you can control your own mind at will, at your own choice. So start taking shallow breaths. And you can jog your feet on the spot on the ground, just a little bit, and pretend you're jogging or fast walking somewhere, and breathe quickly. Think of a goal that you want to achieve in the future. Whether it's a money goal, it's a sports goal, it's a relationship goal, a fantastic relationship, something you've been working towards or wanting for a long time, and breathing shallow, quick. And imagine hopping on a motorcycle down the street, or your favorite car, Ferrari maybe, and reaching out finally and grabbing onto that goal. And as soon as I count 3, 2, 1, I want you to say yes as loud as you can. So 3, 2, 1, yes! So that's sort of a wrestling psych up end part. But it shows you how you can control your own mind, right? You went from completely mellow and relaxed to completely peaked up. And so you can control your own mind through this. So that's what I help people do, is if they, wherever they are in life, if they need to start mellowing out, a lot of it's anxiety and stress, but some of it's, I just don't have my drive anymore. I don't know what my purpose is. I've got these blocks and I'm having such a hard time moving past them, and I need some help with it. So one session with me is $110, but I do a package of 8 for $90 per piece. So that's the package that I do. And Dr. Ryer and I think Alex in the back there may have some paperwork for it. So if you're interested in working with me and going further, the meditations get deeper, they get more intense, but nothing that you can't handle, or if you're saying and finding at a point where you go, Rick, it's a little beyond where I'm out of my mental scope, that's fine.
How long is each session?
They're an hour long.
So you do 8-hour sessions for $90?
90 per session.
Oh,
Yeah. Down from 110 for one session. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.